evening, and welcome to Copperfield's Books virtual event with Chris Matthews. My name is Jamie Madsen, and I'm the Marketing and Events Coordinator here at Copperfield's Books, and I'll also be your host for the evening. So because event proceeds allow us to continue providing this free event program, I'd like to take a moment here and thank you all for your continued support. And just a couple items to note tonight before we get started. If you take a look at your chat box, I will be using that to provide links to view upcoming Copperfield's events, details for purchasing tonight's title, as well as previous works by Chris. I'll also include a 10% off discount and my contact details if you need to follow up for any information. Additionally, the Q&A box will be your go-to with any questions or comments for the speaker. The format will feature between 20 to 30 minutes of speaking and will then be followed by a live Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see an icon that says Q&A. Please go ahead and submit your questions here rather than replying in the chat box. So without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce tonight's author, Chris Matthews. Chris is a visiting professor at Fulbright University, Vietnam. He is the author of the New York Times bestsellers, Bobby Kennedy, A Raging Spirit, Jack Kennedy, Elusive Hero, Tip and the Gipper, When Politics Worked, Kennedy and Nixon, and Hardball, which I will be sharing later. For 20 years, he anchored Hardball with Chris Matthews on MSNBC. And he is with us tonight to discuss his brand new memoir, This Country, My Life in Politics and History. And this event has been highly anticipated by many of you as well as by myself. So with that, I'm really pleased to hand it over to you, Chris. Why don't you take it away for us?
Jamie, thank you so much. You know, I think everybody would like to maybe get a chance to present their lives as best they can in their own words. And my life has been a great fortune for me. I've had the adventures in my life are almost inexplicable. I feel like sometimes like I'm Forrest Gump because I've been to so many places at so many times when history was really being made. I'm going to do this chronologically just to give you a taste of about 8 different adventure moments, I have to call them, in my life. And in fact, I dedicate this book to people who watch me all these years, over 20 years, because this is the part of my life that you didn't get to see on television. Most of it happened before I got on television back in '94. I have to tell you, I have to start with something that means a lot to people my age. I'm 75 and we grew up in the Cold War. We grew up hiding under our desks at school, worried about a Russian bombing raid with nuclear weapons. We were told by our nuns in my case that we'd have about a 15-minute warning. So we're very aware of the fact that all the way through to the Cuban Missile Crisis, this country faced the prospect of a third world war with the use of nuclear weapons, possibly the end of civilization as we know it. Still possible, but it was certainly more possible, more probable that it might happen back during the Cold War. And so for me to be in Budapest, Hungary in 1989, to be interviewing leaders of the country and discovered the first signs that the Iron Curtain was coming down, that the Cold War was ending because the people in Eastern Europe were throwing off the bonds of communism. I interviewed a fellow named Giza Yasansky. He was a professor at the University of Karl Marx University, formerly Karl Marx University. And he was an economist. And he began telling me about the writers and the intellectuals meeting in the countryside. Those were his words, in the countryside, talking about change and reform. And I thought, this guy must be crazy. He'll never get rid of the Iron Curtain. It's stuck. We're captured in a world of East versus West, in a dangerous world with nuclear weapons facing each other. And then I went out and talked to other people like the local economic planner in Budapest. And he said, the road to Damascus is very crowded, which was a cynic's way of saying people are being converted from communism overnight or claiming to be converted from communism, but it was going on. I met the Communist Party boss of Budapest. Actually, my 6-year-old son was taking pictures, we have them, of me interviewing him. And he said, the socialist model is not working. And so I began to recognize something was up. This is in April of 1989. At this point, the Iron Curtain was down, the Berlin Wall was there. Everything was stuck as it had been since basically, well, in the case of the Iron Curtain, 1947. And I began to discover there's something afoot. I noticed at first at my hotel, the Intercontinental, where I noticed the music in the elevator was Beach Boys. Out on the Utsi Vad, which is the main drag, there were cartoonists making pictures and showing them of Woody Allen and people like that, American Jack Nicholson. It was a country that wanted so much to be part of the West. Hungary did. And of course, I thought back on 1956 when they rebelled against Soviet tanks, throwing cobblestones at tanks. So they wanted to be free a lot earlier than this, but 1989, and later that summer, it was the government in Budapest that tore down the Iron Curtain. They opened it up and let all the Germans from East Germany and the rest who wanted to get out from the Iron Curtain to flee west into Austria. And that was the beginning. That November, I was in Berlin itself as the wall was coming down. I would interview people. What's going on here? I remember people telling me, well, we're getting second-class citizenship under the communists. Our currency is worthless. We can't even go to the local hotels because those are for tourists. We can't travel anywhere because our money's worthless. We can't buy a decent car because they don't make decent cars here. The Trabant takes you 18 months to get one. They're terrible. They were being treated like second-class citizens in their own country. They were not free. And to make that point, I remember being at the Berlin Wall right next to the Brandenburg Gate, the great separation in the city between East and West, and having a young man tell me, when I asked him, what is freedom? Was ist Freiheit? He said, talking to you, a Western reporter. And so things were changing. The wall came down, the end of the communist empire in Eastern and Central Europe. I saw it up front. I saw it coming. I got to actually meet the people involved. It was an amazing experience, maybe my greatest. In 1994, another amazing occurrence. I had been in the Peace Corps for 2 years in Africa, in a small country, a black ruled country called Swaziland, right on the border of South Africa. We could never go into South Africa because its government in Pretoria, its apartheid government, thought we were dangerous. Some of us were, I wasn't, but some of the guys in my group and women may have caused trouble. But we watched apartheid by reading the newspapers and listening to South African broadcasting and Springbok, that's the other station in Afrikaans. And in 1994, I got to see it all end because a man named Nelson Mandela would not come out of prison until they agreed to legalize his party, the ANC, and to legalize the Communist Party. He wanted a real national election for all races. And the white government said, okay, we're going to let you out and we're going to have a real national election here. And I was there with Archbishop Tutu, the Anglican Bishop of Cape Town, as he got to vote for the first time. I walked into the voting booth with him and he yelled, yippee, at 62, he could vote. I spent the morning with him talking about the evils of apartheid, just he and I, and how he was embarrassed to be an African man with a daughter. He had to explain all the restraints on her as a young Black girl, and she couldn't go to the swing. She couldn't drink the water, public fountain, couldn't do anything as a Black. It was rough, as bad as our old Jim Crow was, maybe worse, because their country was 3/4 or 4, I was close to 7/8 at one point. It had gotten to that point. It was Black Africans and they had no power. But that day they got power. And I watched them voting that day. We went around to the voting stations and my God, Archbishop Tutu and I were walking together and we'd go past stations where you could see people lined up to vote from one horizon to another. It was out of the Bible, all because Nelson Mandela said, we're going to change this country by democracy, by elections. I think we Americans should think about that, how valuable and treasured democracy really is to people who never had it. And so I went to Belfast in 1998 during the Good Friday Accords. And my family, like many of our families, they're mixed, Irish, but Protestant on one side, Catholic on the other, just like Northern Ireland. And I watched them come together with the peace treaty. I know there's still trouble over there, but not the troubles. They're not killing each other. And I saw Irish Protestant men cheering for peace. I also saw the bombings going on at the time of that election, just like there were bombings at the time of the South African election, people trying to resist democracy. And I remember working with the guy who drove me around, a Protestant guy, who talked about how the Catholics had these terrible habits like wearing school uniforms that are many colored and not the black and white uniforms that the Protestant kids wore. These little stupid prejudices. Or why do Catholics have to genuflect in front of churches? Well, I don't know if they do, but imagine talking about these differences as if they're really important. But that was the week that Northern Ireland found a treaty. They accepted the fact that they're going to solve all future decisions about the destiny of the country, whether it remain part of the United Kingdom, Britain, or it would become part of Ireland. And they said it would be up to the voters. So until there are a majority of Roman Catholic voters, if there ever are, they're going to stay the way they are, part of the United Kingdom with a shared government, shared power. I get to see all that. And having grown up in a family where my mom and dad had a very small wedding party because they were from different religions. I got to tell you, it was great to see those two people agreeing to live together. Speaking of religion, I was in Rome during Pope John Paul II's funeral. one of the most impressive things I've ever been to. The music that played constantly was, we were on the Janicolo, the hill above St. Peter's Square, watching 5 million people waiting in line. The first 3 million or so were Romans who always looked great. They just well turned out people and waiting in line because this Pope made a point of being not just titular Bishop of Rome, he was the true Bishop of Rome. And even though he was from Poland, John Paul II made a point to spend every weekend, practically he was Pope, visiting a church in Rome, and in each case, visiting with the pastor, having dinner with them the night before, and then saying mass, and then meeting with the children of the parish in the recreation hall or whatever they have. And so he took his title of Bishop of Rome quite seriously, and the people really turned out for him. And then the Polish people are poor, really poor in their clothing. You could just tell they were not well off, and they all came down in buses or whatever they could to pay tribute to their great hero, who had a lot to do with bringing down the Iron Curtain. So that's one part of my life, the journalist part, where I was able to cover the great stories and really be on the inside of history. And I could answer some more questions about it if you had those. But the early part of my life was equally interesting to Americans. Excuse me. I was fortunate to come back from the Peace Corps and knocked on doors on Capitol Hill. I didn't know anybody really. And finally getting a job as a Capitol policeman, which I liked doing for about 3 months. I was basically doing that in the afternoon, a patronage position from a US Senator from Utah. I worked in the Senator's office in the morning, answering complicated mail, writing short speeches. I later became, within 3 or 4 months, one of his legislative assistants. And then I got to work higher jobs till I became a speechwriter to President Carter in the White House. I spent some time on the Air Force One, writing speeches on that old Selectric 2 typewriter as the plane would be taking off for the next speech, the next stop. I later became chief of staff to Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, a position actually created by an act of law, administrative assistant to the Speaker. And I did that, and I was involved with Carter, really facing his end as he went to vote. In fact, we knew we were losing the election the night before out in Seattle. And by the time we flew across the country for him to vote, that morning, 3 or 4 hours later, because of the shift in time zone, we knew where we were heading. And I actually got into the helicopter with President Carter as we headed down to near his home in Plains, Georgia, so he could vote, knowing he had lost and had to tell his wife, Rosalind, that he'd lost. And I went through that, was very unhappy, but I stuck with him to the end. I stayed with him to the last day he was president until we all saw him off on a plane down to Georgia for him to go home. And then I became top aide to Tip O'Neill. And I spent 6 years with him in the morning, every morning, getting ready for the day, talking about what we should be saying that day, what he should be saying, and fighting the good fight against Ronald Reagan, and occasionally making good deals with him, like to save Social Security and reform the tax system, bringing down the top rate, but also getting rid of all the loopholes. It was an amazing time working with a real legend. Like some days, Tip and I would get in the back room. I would never call him Tip, of course, Mr. Speaker, for me it was. And we get in the back room and he'd tell me the old stories of politics back in the days of James Michael Curley, the last hurrah days. And I had all that experience. And to me, politics was something I was interested in from the time I was 5 when Eisenhower was running. And I just was lucky to get, even though I'm an outsider to my perspective, I think I was able to work on the inside. And to be on the inside after those years of being in Africa as a Peace Corps volunteer, teaching business, and on some occasion taking a long hitchhike by myself up through East Africa. I got to live my dream working in politics and learning from it. I've learned a lot from these. I learned from Tip how to get along with people on the other side, like Ronald Reagan, how to get through the day when you're not popular politically. He was a big liberal, an old style liberal, and he had to put up with that sort of whatever gold digging, I would call it, age of Reagan, where the rich people wanted to get richer and everybody else had to deal with that. And I got to see the end of the Iron Curtain. I got to see the end of the British Empire in Africa, the end of the Soviet Empire. I got to see the rise of Uhuru, of freedom in Africa. I got to see the hopes of the East Germans. And by the way, Germany has become one of great countries since they got united and free from their past, thank God, and from the Soviet tanks. I got to see it all. Being a kid who grew up in the 1950s and seeing a lot of bad things going on here in our country and overseas, I got to see the turnaround because of history. Again, I think I'm like Forrest Gump. Without the handicaps, I got to see it all, and I'm sharing it. Kathleen, my wife, got me to dedicate the book to the people that watched me all those years because they were good company for 20 years on the air. and they deserve to know my full background. And thanks to Simon & Schuster, and thanks to small bookstores, like the one you're attending right now by Zoom. This book's now available. It came out last week. It's called This Country, My Life in Politics and History. It's got beautiful pictures, especially of my wife. I'm not too sorry to say. A lot of great pictures of our family and of these places I've covered these events I've been with, pictures of me with President Obama, one of my heroes, maybe my hero of the times I was covering politics, and lots of great stories about John McCain and people like that. And right now I'm lucky to be, as Jamie said, I'm now actually, since she had the notes of me, I've now been promoted to Distinguished Professor of American Politics and Media over in Ho Chi Minh City. Talk about a change. The former Indochina is now, of course, Vietnam, the Republic of Vietnam, and it's our ally against the Chinese, of course, because we have a history ahead of us, which is going to be very much as allies together against the rise of China. It's how history changes sides so predictably in a way, but not at the time you're living. We fought Vietnam, they call it the American War over there, and now we're allies, and I'm a professor of some very bright students, I must tell you, very bright. It's kind of daunting to deal with them as a teacher. Jamie, I want to give it back to you. I would leave one thought. There are moments I talked about in my life, and one moment was when Tip O'Neill retired. The last evening, I walked into his back room, and they're sitting in the room like sitting Shiva in a Jewish ceremony for someone who died, sitting together quietly, were Bobby Byrd, the Democratic leader from West Virginia, Bob Dole, the Republican leader from Kansas, Tom Foley from Washington State, my God, up around Gonzaga country and Spokane, and Jim Ray from Texas. And they're all sitting together from both parties, Bob Michael of Illinois, all sitting together, just appreciating the fact that here's Tip O'Neill after 10 years as speaker, is leaving. And there is that, I consider I respect all those men, and they were all men, those days are over. But I think it was a charming tableau of actually people who like each other and fight like hell, but actually do appreciate they're all in the same, into the same purpose of making it a better country. I'm still very romantic about this country, and I wish we could reach beyond the days of Trump, which unfortunately has worked against any kind of deal making, and a willingness to just say, look, if you get 60%, I can live with it, but give me my 40%. Like they did with Social Security and things like that. Give me something and I can take it back to my people. But today they're all on the Republican side, petrified of Donald Trump, afraid to make any deal for the country. And we have a stagnation facing up in the next several years, I think, right through the next couple elections. I don't see it going away unless the Democrats find a way to get really smart and really tough and make the Republicans pay for their loyalty to Trump, because they're going to stay loyal to them until there's a greater fear, because right now they're petrified of Trump more than anything on earth. And that's the problem that Democrats find in trying to get some of them to be negotiable. And that has to be the case when you have a 50-50 Senate. You can't expect one party to do everything by reconciliation. It's not going to work. They'll never get 50 in the case of West Virginia and Joe Manchin. Not going to happen. But Jamie, this is a great forum.
For a second, I forgot that I was hosting and I was kind of just like soaking it all in. Extremely interesting. Your life is so fascinating. And even, talking about the compromises that were made in these huge issues and, then kind of getting back to our political state is just mind-boggling in its own, but, we have progress to be made. We have plenty of questions, so I don't want to hold out much longer. Are you ready to have some?
I'm ready. I keep having these pictures come into my mind. Memory's a great editor. If you can remember something, that means it's memorable. So why do you? But I want to let everybody get involved here because you're all part of this tonight.
Okay, great. We'll start with Michael. Mr. Matthews, how do you think the Kennedys would do in today's political atmosphere?
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. There are issues, cultural issues today and moral issues to a lot of people, like abortion rights. I don't know how they would have handled it. They're Roman Catholics, and in their day, that wasn't a debate. It certainly wasn't a big prominent debate. I don't know if it ever came up, but they would have had to deal with it. And I don't know where they would have come down. Probably today, you don't know. I don't want to speak for them, but at least they're through that. They had to worry about the fact that people were afraid that if a Catholic got to be president, he would be or she would be obedient to the Pope. Well, they didn't have to worry about that with Jack Kennedy. I got to tell you, this guy's a very secular guy. I mean, he was Irish Catholic, but he was very much an Ivy League guy, very much into the secular nature of American democracy, and understood that you render under Caesar the things that are Caesar's, like the law, and you leave the matters of faith to the church. And I think he was sophisticated enough to make that division. But of course, there are nuanced questions. You know, at what point does society enter into a decision about abortion? I mean, there is a point where I believe it does enter in. And that's why I think that Roe v. Wade was ingenious. However it was decided, I think the trimester system makes perfect sense to most people, I think. And then, I mean, I'm talking generally. Everybody has a right to make their own decision. But I think generally it seems like a sound, secular, but also respectful way to look at abortion rights. Mainly leaving it with the woman and removing, you know, any kind of obstacles and, you know, are unnecessary. So I think that would be the issue I could think of. Otherwise, I think Kennedy was a cold warrior. He certainly took us further into Vietnam than it looks he should have. I think on issues like civil rights, he's great. I think they would have been great. Bobby especially. Bobby was, to me, a great man. Because he was for law and order, he was pro-cop, but damn it, you don't mess with civil rights with him. He was very much aware of the rights of minorities, especially to get a break in this country. And, you know, I think he was, could be pretty tough on the segregationists. And I think he would have been good. I still think he's a pretty good standard, Bobby Kennedy. It wasn't he didn't have a hard and fast ideology. It was more of a mix of, expecting people to meet their own personal responsibilities, but at the same time, giving a break to people. He used to say, talk about the case of George Floyd, get your foot off the other guy's neck. And that was the phrase.
Wow.
We have a real life case of that horror of a foot of a police officer on the neck of a guy who's dying. I think he would have understood that case vividly.
That was a really great answer. Thank you. Okay, Julia, to switch it up a little bit, is wondering, to what do you attribute your love and passion for history, and how can we spread that? Great question, Julia.
Well, you know, I think that's a great question. You know, Julia, where do we get our curiosities? Sometimes I say the more you know about something, the more you're interested in it. If you pick up a newspaper, you know something about something, you'll probably read more about it. That's why I like actual newspapers, because you actually see, something going on in Ireland, something's going on in Italy. My parents come from there or whatever, or Yugoslavia or somewhere. I mean, you find something about race. If you're a minority, you follow something that's of interest to you already. I mean, I'm a movie nut. I mean, I will read anything about certain movie stars, anything about them. Kate Hepburn or Cary Grant or anybody like that, or John. I care about that stuff. I'm like Turner Classic Movies. The older you get, the more you turn that channel on. I think reading leads to more reading. My wife is a fiction nut. I mean, she reads everything from cover to cover. I mean, she's got everything. Number one women's detective agency in Africa, and she reads everything and all the big stories, big fiction. I'm a history person. I don't know. I think we were interested in politics in our late teens because of the draft. I mean, any day you could be picked up and hauled off to some camp or fort somewhere to learn to be a boot camp, and then you're off to Vietnam. I mean, how can you not know? And the women of our time, our contemporaries, they knew the guys they liked or were hanging around with. They saw the vulnerability they had. It was always in the air. I think if you're a person of color, you have to follow the news today, because you see what's going on with not just the police, but gerrymandering and all the techniques that unfortunately one political party, the Republicans, are using to keep you from voting.
Absolutely.
And they see themselves as a diminishing part of the population. They see a demographic shift and they don't like it. And maybe politically that makes sense. It isn't necessarily immoral to be fearful about it, but it is wrong to hurt someone's chances to be a full American in your country because you are afraid of those numbers changing. And I mean, instead of trying to get their vote out, the conservative vote out, they want to make sure the other vote doesn't get out. The business of politics should be getting your vote to the polls. It shouldn't be keeping the other people from the polls.
Well said.
It's as simple as that.
Man. Um, there's a couple
By the
questions.
way, the Democrats benefit from a big minority vote. They're not gods because they support it. They know what's going on. They get more. Where they're wrong is, especially the Hispanic or Latino community, don't count on everybody being in lockstep politically. Just don't count on it. It's not just the Cuban Americans that aren't automatically lefties, because they come from lefty countries and they've seen how bad they are, whether it's
Right.
Daniel Ortega or it's Maduro or it's Castro. They don't particularly, when they hear the word socialist, they don't light up. They go, oh my God, I've heard that one before. And those countries call themselves socialists. And not all the socialists are dictators, but these people come from so-called socialist countries that are dictatorships and frightening places. And they're not coming from Copenhagen.
Right.
So they're not necessarily minorities. To get back to my point, Democrats support minority voting because it's generally helpful to them, and also it's the right thing to do. But don't count on that forever, because the great American thing, I say, my emotion of American exceptionalism, I wrote it in the book, is this is a country where you can become an American with heart and mind, and voting by feet, by getting here. You can become an American. You can be as American as George Washington. It's not like France, where you maybe never be French,
Right.
or some of these countries, you're never going to be this or that. But you can, or Japan, maybe, I hear. But you can actually become one hell of an American among good people if you want to, and that's what makes it fantastic. Because it's really not. I think F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, it wasn't about an idea. It was about an idea. It's not about the land and blood and all that stuff.
Right.
It wasn't about culture and language, especially. It's about an idea. All men are created equal, and everybody gets to vote and everybody gets to speak. And if you get that into your head, you're an American, I think.
Are you sure you want to leave politics? I think
if you ever want to do, anybody's watching, if you get a break, go to a naturalization ceremony. You'll be crying.
I'll include that in the follow-up email. I'll include some links for that tomorrow.
Because if you do that, you will see people of all nationalities, different looks, and they want to be Americans. And they went through a lot of trouble to do it. They studied the Constitution, everything else. They passed tests that most people can't take.
Exactly.
Because they want to be one of us, and all they want is acceptance. And everybody wants to learn English. That's a stupid argument. You learn English. You may keep your old language, but you're going to learn English to get around.
Absolutely.
And those English tests are not easy. So I think it's a big part of you can't do this in other countries. I've heard you can't become Japanese. You can't become really French. I mean, I don't want to knock other countries.
No, you're
great. That's what America is. It's a land of immigrants, and the only people that didn't come here because they wanted to are the African Americans who brought here, and they're as American as apple pie, as far as I'm concerned. How can they not be? I mean, they've been here way before the Irish got here, way before the English got here. The African Americans were here because they were brought here. Unfortunately, obviously.
I really appreciate that answer. And, we're getting, just to touch on this, I know you've touched on this a little bit, but Rosemary's wondering, do you think bipartisanship has a chance today? I know
it's not a question of as a chance. It's the only chance, because I wouldn't mind. I'm against the filibuster. I don't like taking this position. It's one of the positions I take where I say it's the best position there is. It's like Roe v. Wade. It's the best position there is. There's no perfect that's going to make everybody feel morally okay. We're not going to agree on it. It's going to be a debate. But Roe v. Wade, to me, is where I'm at. And the same with I'm ready to get rid of the filibuster right now, because if we don't make things passable by a majority vote, we're never going to pass anything. I did the math on this. There are like 21 states now that are ruby red. They're not going to elect any Democratic senators. Got it? Well, everybody listen to this. And all that means you're never going to get 60 votes if you're a Democrat to get anything through in our lifetime. It's not going to happen. Mississippi's not going to elect Democrats, or Alabama or Louisiana. They're not going to do that anymore. Those days are over. South Carolina, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So, or Idaho, or North Dakota, South Dakota, Idaho, Wyoming, they're not going to switch to the left. They're not going to vote like New York City. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So you got to get around that 60 vote requirement. Unfortunately, that's what it's become. It's a 60 vote requirement. It's not Mr. Smith goes to Washington with Jimmy Stewart giving a law speech. It's not that. It's 60 votes as the threshold. And if that's the threshold, forget about voting rights. Forget about minimum wage ever going up. Forget about police reform, forget about immigration, things we know to keep our society together, we have to do. We have to show the white people, to be blunt, have to do something about police reform. they have to show a good heart here. They got to say, no, we don't accept this. We do believe Black Lives Matter. We believe that. And we've had a terrible, I was watching, talking movies, I was watching a Cary Grant movie, a fabulous movie, Bringing Up Baby with Kate Hepburn. And in the middle of the movie, maybe a third of the way in, out of nowhere, he says to some guy, "That's white of you." Now, why would he say that? Why did they put that stuff in? Why did they only introduce Black players in Hitchcock movies as Pullman car attendants, conductors? Why do they only, and they're always wide-eyed and everything. Why do they always do that? Just to punch the Black down a little further, just have a little fun. An hour and a half movie, oh, you got to punch the Blacks down a little bit in this movie, when it has nothing to do with race related. It's just, we had terrible tendencies in our culture to keep people down. And Hitchcock is great. Why was he doing this? Why was Cary Grant going along with it? He was an immigrant. Why is he going along with this stuff?
Right.
And but I think we got used to it, and we got used to a lot of terrible things. And I think we have to get a majority vote for some good things and show that this country can get things done. And I'm not telling that's the secret. That is not the solution, because as long as Cinema from Arizona, and not Cinema necessarily, but Cinema together with Joe Manchin of West Virginia, as long as this Democratic margin, which is not really a margin, it's 50-50, as long as this goes on, we're not going to get all this stuff done, because we're not going to get rid of the filibuster, because we're not going to have 50 votes to do it with Kamala Harris. It's not going to happen. So this is Puffy. I've talked about this in the interviews I've been doing for the book, and all I know is, if being soft and nice doesn't work, go the other way. And
yes.
When I worked for TIP, we were fighting over infrastructure, and the Republican leader was dumping all over our plan to create jobs and build things, rebuild things. So I called up the chief engineer of Bob Michael's district in Peoria, Illinois, and I got a list of all the bridges in his district, his hometown, that were below safety code, dangerous bridges. Right that moment, dangerous. The school buses have to go over dangerous bridges. And the speaker went on the floor of the House and read that list to him and the whole Congress and the country to bring home to them. It's not just a stupid partisan fight. If you want to not fix up this country like every first world country does, if you don't want to paint some stuff and fix some stuff, we're going to just become a junkyard. But you have to bring it home to them and say, look what this person's defending in their district. They're defending all these rickety old bridges. They don't want to fix them, but you got to take it home to them. Not once in this debate over infrastructure has a member of Congress come out on television or radio or in the newspaper and said, here's what needs to be done in that clown's district, and he's not voting for it. Embarrass them.
Absolutely.
Put the heat to them. Put their heat to their toes so they know what they're standing on, and say, look, buddy, you're playing defense. Oh yeah, well, don't be so afraid of Trump, because we're going to make you afraid of us, and we're going to make your people at home say, this guy's not doing the job.
Absolutely. How can you?
It's playing tough. It's showing smarts, and it's it may not work, but it'd be certainly a lot of fun, because you'd make them pay for their inadequacies.
Right, and it's tangible. I mean, it's something they can use.
And by the way, West Virginia used to love pork barrel under Bobby Byrd. Byrd almost moved the half the Capitol facilities to West Virginia. He loved building buildings up there, spending money on infrastructure. He loved it. So times haven't changed that much, I don't think. Maybe they have. I don't think
Thank you so much for answering those. I promise I'll take it a little bit more, less political, more about you. So there's endless feedback from people saying, thank you so much. They're so thrilled to be able to hear this. Sally says she received my copy of This Country 2 days ago. She's thrilled. I'd like to know if we can look forward to any Chris Matthews on the screen. I'm so pleased that Al Franken is doing some YouTube presentations. Me too. I really miss seeing and hearing your take on things. Truly, please think about it.
Well, I keep doing stuff. I've done Bill Maher. I've done Steve Colbert. I did Meet the Press this Sunday. I did Joy Reid, who replaced me in the 7 o'clock Eastern time slot on MSNBC. I did Morning Joe. I did Today with Savannah. Was great. I'm trying to do everybody to get back on the show. Let's see what happens. I'm 75. Can I repeat that? I'm 75. And my wife is younger, and she wants to travel. She wants to do stuff. And
yeah,
I know. It's a weird thing to be on television every night at sundown for 26 years, counting all the shows. So I never really saw the sundown. And by the time it was to go down, which Kathy loves, I don't drink, but she likes to watch the sun go down and drink it. I found myself by Friday night so tired. I was doing a Saturday show, a Sunday show too, the Chris Matthews show. So I was doing 6 shows a week, taping one on Friday. I had to smoke a cigar some nights to get from one show to the other just to stay awake. I was so tired because you get up in the morning and you got to get on top of the show by, you meet your producers around noon, then you got to meet them again, and you have to write this opening, you got to write the close, the commentary, you got to edit everything, but most importantly, you got to find out what you're talking about, because every night you have to be an expert.
Right.
It's not a terrible, it's a good job, but it's a job. And hey, look, honestly, if I didn't have to leave and decided to leave, I would have probably kept still doing it. But I'm no COVID expert. I'm not Tony Fauci. I don't think I brought any of that to discussion. But I'm really good on elections, picking winners. I'm really good on picking winners, and I love predicting who's going to win. I love the fact that I picked Barack Obama to be the first African American president. I said it in the 2004 speech. I just said it right down the air. I love the fact that I thought Kamala would be the nominee would be the Biden's pick for VP. I said that several weeks ahead of time, but that was to me logical. I mean, it just, even though she beat him up in the debates, I said this is going to happen. And the reason it was going to happen is that she was very close friends to Beau Biden, his son who died. And I knew that would be a key. Biden's very inside, very local politician, very much old school. That's the kind of thing that would drive him. What his son cared about, his late son.
Wow. Kind of a funny question. Julia says, all right, picking winners. What is Buttigieg's future?
Well, Buttigieg knows something very important about his boss, and that is Joe Biden doesn't want to share the celebrity. Listen closely. There's only one celebrity in this administration. It's not Kamala. There are no cabinet members who are celebrities, nobody. And if you're smart, you won't let that happen. You got to be very careful with Biden. He never had celebrities working for him. You keep your head down. You just keep your head down, do your job, and be loyal as hell. And don't say anything you're not supposed to about anything. So she's being very, very careful, I've noticed. She's not out there defining herself yet, which she'll have to do at some point if she wants to run for president. She'll have to define herself politically, personality-wise. We have to know who she is. And I don't think the country does. Maybe in California, people know. I'm not sure Californians know her either. She's been too fast in going up. She's moved up very fast from AG to, district attorney to AG to senator to VP in a matter of a few years. And I'm not sure people know her well. But I think Buttigieg is doing the same thing. He's a gay man. He's married. Chasten and Chasten's a character to watch. I mean, we used to have, I would have them on Hardball, and there was an overflow crowd one night in another room. And I said, I want to go in and after the show, I said, I want to go and thank those people for watching from the other room. And Chasten says, let me come. So he wanted to come in and give a talk to them too. I mean, he's not hiding in the corner. This guy is a very interesting personality, maybe more of an extrovert than Pete. Wow. But Pete's going to be good on, really good on, if we can get this infrastructure. He took me on a tour of an old Packard plant. He took me into a sewer one time. We didn't go in the sewer, but he opens up this manhole and he's down with all this highly state-of-the-art electronic equipment in a sewer. Oh my gosh. I don't know what goes on down there, but he did. And this is Buttigieg. So, people say he's gay. Oh, that explains everything. Not to explain anything. That's one aspect of his life. And this other part is that he is technical. He's a Midwesterner. You can't be more Midwestern than South Bend, Indiana. And right. A state where he probably could never got elected statewide. It's too Republican, too culturally conservative. But look where he is.
Right.
I mean,
interesting
guy to watch. The most famous transportation secretary in history. That's pretty, just hope he gets a bill to do. I hope he gets an infrastructure bill, hard kind of infrastructure, which is highways and roads and stuff like that.
Well, as people continue to pour in, we just love hearing you talk about this stuff. So you should consider, maybe you can do a tour with your wife on vacation and do like a YouTube channel for us all. That would be great.
Just selling books. That's all. Caroline Kennedy told me. Caroline Kennedy once said to me, you sell these books out of the back of your car. Just
you could. Well, I think it's great to end on one last question. I know you've got another news spot after this. So a couple people are wondering, who do you admire most from politics?
That's so great. Obama, cool as Sinatra when you meet him, just cool. he's not one of these heavy presences in your room. Some people come on very heavy, and I think it's more like what I heard about Jack Kennedy: light, easy to deal with, easy to be with. I'm just on personality. Very wry sense of humor. I would say irreverent in the sense that you can think of him. Liberals or progressives always hate to have people being lighthearted, but I'm saying that's a mistake liberals make. I mean, most people are lighthearted, and they do see the humor in almost everything if they want to survive long. They take the weekends off. They're not always political. They just are not. Tip O'Neill survived for 50 elections in a row. He won because he could take the weekend off. And on Monday morning, he'd say, where are we? What's going on? He relaxed. He played poker. He played golf. He had a few drinks. I think that's what Obama, I think he's enjoying a part of a life where he has taken the time off. I think he's not really sitting around every day. I think he's had an interview the other night with Anderson Cooper. It looked pretty deep. But generally, I like him. I like John McCain a lot.
Yeah.
What a guy. What a patriotic guy. I like Dianne Feinstein. I've always liked her. I know she's getting on, but I'll tell you something. I've always looked at her as a grown-up. And we need grown-ups in the political party I'm most loyal to. And I just love the fact of how grown-up she is, having been what she was in San Francisco, and you know, Moscone killing and all that. And she threw it all, and she grew through all of it. And I used to love Daniel Patrick Moynihan, an Irishman who was an intellectual and also senator from New York for 24 years. How's that? Here's a person who would be interesting if he weren't senator from New York. How's that for a standard? Because some of these people are only interesting because they have these jobs. You know, it's really unfortunate. You know, I look up to Churchill. I know people think of him as old school, but I think he saved the world in the 20th century. I think standing up to Hitler all alone is just nothing like it, and keeping his people together when they're under direct threat of annihilation, basically. He did that. I think Nelson Mandela, I mentioned him earlier. I don't know what it took to say, I'm staying in prison. I've been in here with no life. I'm not with Winnie. I have no life in this prison, but I'm staying here until my people are free to vote. It's chilling.
It really is.
I mean, most people after 20 some years, I'm getting out of here. I want to have a steak. I want to meet my wife. I want to be with my kids. I want to be alive again. I can't stand this 8-foot cell.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'm not leaving until I have my people free. I mean, there's a reason why he's maybe the greatest man of our time, greatest person.
Fantastic.
You know, I have other heroes in other countries. I like it. I like Angela Merkel. I think she's unbelievable. I mean, she doesn't make a mistake, and our country is solid, and it's democratic, and it's a liberal democratic country with a lot of social welfare, and she doesn't break. And she came out of communist East Germany. There's some amazing people in the world. I hope we have more going to politics. I hope I recommend anybody thinking, if somebody's willing to take the risk of public exposure in politics, it is a big risky business, and it's no fun anymore. You're under watch all the time, and you say the wrong word and you're dead for months, if not for life. And you have to be so careful, and it's the way it is. And if you don't like it, don't go in. But if you can take it, get in. We need more people running. I know the Democratic Party does not have a great bench right now. Does it? And the Republican bench is scared to death.
Yeah.
They're useless people. They're not leaders. Mitch McConnell's not a leader. Barrasso of Wyoming's not a leader. Thune of North Dakota or South Dakota is not a leader. They're up there scared to death that Trump's watching. They're afraid when they go on television that Trump's watching. Oh, I can't do anything wrong here. It's Freddy Krueger. He's frightening. He's not going away. He keeps coming back. But he just keeps eating now. That's going to be a problem. By the way, the paper today, he sneaks into New York twice a week now, and he says he's not there, but he sneaks into his Trump Tower. He only has a couple people working with him. He has a couple body men. I guess they go for the cheeseburgers. I'm serious. I wouldn't say this about anything else, but he deserves ignominy for what he's done. He has walked away and taken with him the faith we have in our democracy.
Absolutely.
The greatest thing we've had in this country is elections since 1788, every 2 years for Congress, every 4 for president. And what's important about it, I thought this through. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press goes hand in hand with elections. If you don't have freedom of speech, you're not going to have elections. If you don't have elections, you won't have freedom of speech. They work together. Freedom to figure out who your government should be and to keep them in touch and somehow control under you. And basic freedoms work together, because if the government can't be stopped, your freedoms are gone. And you got to think about it. It's not just voting. Voting gives you the power to keep your freedoms. And I saw that in Eastern Europe with the wall coming down and the people who brought it down. I saw it in South Africa. The right to vote is the right to speak. The right to speak is the right to vote. They're in hand. And I think about that, how powerful that is. And if you start messing around with the right to vote, you're messing around all the other liberties that come with it. It's true.
That's such a beautiful message to end on. And again, I'm so grateful that we got you here tonight. I know you're super busy and you're on this, new tour. For everyone asking, absolutely, this is being recorded. You will all receive an email tomorrow that will include the link to this recording. It will include tonight's title with the discount code Previous Works by Chris. I'm also going to try and find a naturalist ceremony that I can link that's a little bit local.
It's
so
American to watch people become American.
Yeah, that sounds.
Trump, what a clown. He should have done that instead of yelling about the border. He should have gone and said, I like immigrants. Let's see. Let's go to the
let's learn more.
If he did like immigrants, if he did, he would have shown
it. Right. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. And again, thank you so much, Chris. Why don't you take us out? It's been such a special hour, and I wish you the best and hope to see you on our TV screen real soon.
Thank you so much. Democracy. It's what we have and we got to keep it. And that means dealing with demagogues and what would be tyrants. And I worry about the past is prologue. What's the prologue today? Where are we headed? When we have a general who says we should have a military coup and nobody seems to make much of an issue of it. Oh yeah, that happened today. My God, we don't even worry about those statements. We're worried. We should be worried more about where Trump has taken us, not just the insurrection in our capital, but the 2/3 of the Republican Party who believed that Trump wasn't elected and Biden wasn't. What kind of mind control is this? This is Kool-Aid stuff. It's not funny. And we got to know which way he's taking us. And when he talks about being reinstated this next August, he's come up with a new word that's not anywhere in the Constitution. There's no reinstatement. But then again, this general says we'll have a military coup. They're talking the same language. It's frightening. Jamie, you're a pro. Thank you so much. The way you handled me. That was great.
You were great. And everyone get a copy of the book. The pictures are fabulous.
Go to a regular bookstore, a good bookstore. Thank you very much, Jamie.
Thank you. Have a great evening.